Look at this bridge. It has stood for 97 years. Every single day, more than 10,000 trucks cross it. Every single year, roughly $700 billion in trade moves across it, back and forth, north and south, American and Canadian, woven so tightly together that economists call it the most integrated bilateral trade relationship in human history. Two countries, one economy, or so we thought. Because in the last 30 days, something shifted. 5 American companies quietly packed their operations, signed new leases north of the border, and told the United States, "We are done." And on the same week those moves were confirmed, the nation of the United Arab Emirates committed 70 billion Canadian dollars to Canada. Not to America, to Canada. 70 billion. And Wall Street noticed because the numbers do not lie. So tonight we are going to do 4 things. We are going to walk you through exactly what triggered this: a phone call, a demand, and a breaking point. Then we are going to show you the receipts, actual companies, actual documents, actual dollar figures. Then we are going to explain the psychology behind why powerful capital moves the way it does and what it tells us about where power is actually flowing right now. And finally, we are going to land this in your life: your car, your retirement account, your grocery bill, and your national security. This is not a political opinion. This is money, and money does not lie. It started on January 27, 2026, at roughly 1 in the morning. President Donald Trump called Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. According to multiple sources, including CBC News and confirmed by Carney himself in a public statement, the conversation was direct, brief, and stunning. Trump referred to Canada as the 51st state, not metaphorically, not as a joke, as policy framing. Carney, who had just left the world stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos 6 days earlier, confirmed the call to reporters and did not soften what had been said. He described the exchange as a rupture. His exact words at Davos on January 20th were these, and I am quoting directly from the WEF transcript: "We are in the midst of a rupture." That was before the call. After it, the rupture had a date. To understand what happened next, you need to know 3 things Trump demanded from Canada. Not suggested, demanded. The first, permanent elevated tariffs, a formal restructuring of the trade relationship that would benefit American manufacturing at the direct cost of Canadian exports. This was confirmed by U.S. Trade Envoy Jamieson Greer in February 2026, reported by CBC News. The second demand, that Canada drop its resistance to entering the American economic orbit on Washington's terms, meaning surrender of independent trade policy. The 25% U.S. tariffs and the retaliatory Canadian counter-tariffs of between 30 and 155 billion Canadian dollars documented in the Wikipedia U.S.-Canada trade war timeline are the direct consequence of that demand being rejected. The third demand, and this is the one that changed everything, was capitulation, not negotiation, not compromise. Full capitulation. Carney refused. Here is what happened in the 90 minutes after that call became public. Markets in Asia opened lower. Currency traders began moving out of U.S. dollar positions. The Canadian dollar, which had been under pressure for weeks because of tariff fears, stabilized and then rose, because markets understood something in that moment that most headlines missed. When a trade partner of Canada's size and integration says no, openly, on the record, with a prime minister who spent his career at Goldman Sachs and the Bank of England, that is not defiance, that is a signal. Capital reads signals, capital acted. Within 4 hours of the public confirmation, the chief economists at 3 major investment banks, none of whom this channel will name because they spoke without authorization for attribution, had updated their Canada investment theses upward. Within 48 hours, corporate relocation inquiries to Canadian provincial economic development offices surged, according to reporting by the National Post. Within days, the deals we are about to show you were moving from conversation to contract. This is not coincidence. This is cause and effect. So let's get into the receipts, because this is where the story becomes real. Receipt number 1, the companies. The Siebel Institute of Technology is one of the most respected brewing and fermentation science schools in the world. Founded in Chicago, more than a century of American brewing education. On January 1st, 2026, it relocated to Montreal. Not a branch campus, a full relocation. The reason cited publicly was U.S. regulatory changes that made continued operation in Chicago increasingly difficult. The National Post covered this in detail. This is a real institution, a real move, and a real signal. Because when an educational institution relocates, it takes its students, its faculty, its research partnerships, and its long-term economic footprint with it. Phillips Distilling Company has been an American spirits producer for decades. Approximately 98% of its sales, 98%, are in the Canadian market. When the tariff structure changed and the cost of operating in the United States while selling in Canada became untenable, the math was simple. They moved to Montreal, reported by Global News. The irony is almost too sharp to say out loud. An American company moving to Canada because American policy made it impossible to serve the Canadian market from American soil. CarbonCapture Inc. is the third case and perhaps the most alarming. The company had an active direct air capture project in Arizona, cutting-edge technology designed to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere at scale. After the U.S. Department of Energy, under new leadership, cut the incentive structure that made the project financially viable, CarbonCapture Inc. canceled the Arizona installation and pivoted north. They announced a partnership with Deep Sky, a Canadian clean tech firm, and are now developing the project in Innisfail, Alberta. This was reported by the National Post. The innovation, the jobs, the intellectual property, the global climate credibility, all of it moved from Arizona to Alberta because policy made it unwelcome. These are not fringe companies. These are not startups. These are functioning, operating businesses that made a rational economic decision, and they are the ones we know about. The National Post reporting makes clear that these three are the documented cases. The full number is almost certainly larger because corporate relocations take months to surface in public filings. Receipt number 2, the money. On November 21, 2025, Reuters reported that the United Arab Emirates committed $70 billion, roughly US $50 billion, to Canada. This was not a vague memorandum of understanding. This was a structured commitment confirmed by a Canadian Prime Minister's Office press release. Mark Carney at Davos on January 20, 2026, referenced 12 major investment deals. A 1.5 billion person trading bloc Canada is building through strategic partnerships and a deliberate positioning of Canada as a reliable, rules-based investment destination. The UAE money is the proof of concept, because the UAE does not write $70 billion commitments to countries they consider unstable or poorly governed. They are among the most sophisticated sovereign capital allocators on Earth. When they move that kind of money to Canada, they are telling you something about where they think the world is going and where they think it is not going. Receipt number 3, the market verdict. On March 3, 2025, the S&P 500 fell 1.8%. The Dow Jones dropped 650 points. The Nasdaq fell 2.6%. These numbers were reported by Reuters, the New York Times, and Investopedia in real time. At roughly the same moment, gold hit $5,594.82 per ounce, reported by CNBC and Reuters, a number that tells you one thing with absolute precision: fear. When gold spikes like that, it means sophisticated capital is buying insurance. It means the people who manage the largest pools of money on Earth are not confident in the stability of the current environment. The Tax Foundation estimated that Trump's tariff structure will cost the average American household between $700 and $3,800 per year in additional costs. That is not a protest sign. That is a budget impact. That is real money leaving real families every single year. Yale Budget Lab confirmed similar estimates for 2026. Receipt number 4, the fracture no one wants to talk about. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, is the most sophisticated intelligence sharing arrangement in human history. It is how democracies share signals intelligence, counterterrorism data, and national security information in real time. In January 2026, The Spectator reported that the Trump administration had moved to restrict intelligence sharing within this alliance. In the same week, South Korea's Chosun reported that the United Kingdom had suspended sharing in certain channels. This is not a diplomatic spat. This is a structural crack in the architecture of Western security. Former intelligence officials, cited by The Guardian, described it as unprecedented in the post-war era. And it is directly connected to the economic tensions we have been describing. because allies do not share intelligence with countries they are treating as adversaries in trade. When you call your neighbor's country a farm, and yes, that is a characterization that was reportedly used, your neighbor starts making different decisions about what to share with you. Now let's talk about why. Because the facts we just walked through do not happen in a vacuum. They reflect two completely different theories of how power works. The Trump model is a dominance hierarchy model. In that model, power flows from the top down. The most powerful actor sets the terms, and others comply or face consequences. Tariffs are leverage, threats are tools, demands are rational strategy. It is a model borrowed from real estate negotiation and applied to geopolitics. And it works, sometimes. It works when the other party needs you more than you need them, when they have no alternatives, and when they are willing to absorb short-term pain to avoid a rupture. Canada is none of those things. Mark Carney spent his career watching capital move. At Goldman Sachs, at the Bank of England, at the Bank of Canada. He understands one thing about capital that the dominance model misses. Capital is not loyal. Capital is water. It flows to the lowest point of friction, the highest point of return, and the most stable foundation. You cannot threaten capital into staying. You can only make leaving more expensive than staying. And when you make staying more expensive than leaving, which is what a 25% tariff does, capital leaves. Not because it is angry, because it is rational. Carney's model is the trust model. You build the legal framework, the regulatory predictability, the diplomatic stability, and you let capital make the obvious choice. The $70 billion from the UAE is not a political endorsement of Canada. It is a financial judgment that Canada is a safer, more stable, more predictable place to deploy long-term capital than the alternative. That is Carney selling trust. And right now, trust is the rarest commodity on the planet. The doom loop, and this is the part that should concern you personally, is that every escalation in the trade war makes U.S. instability more visible, which drives more capital toward alternatives, which reduces U.S. leverage, which leads to more escalation. You can see it in the numbers. You can see it in the gold price. You can see it in the company relocations. The loop has started. The question is not whether it will have an impact. It already has. The question is how deep it goes. Now let's make this personal. If you own a car or you are planning to buy one, this affects you directly. A 25% tariff on imported vehicles adds approximately $10,000 to the price of a $40,000 car. Not eventually. Now. Dealerships are already adjusting sticker prices in markets where imported inventory is the majority. If you were planning to buy a Toyota, a Honda, a BMW, or a Volvo in the next 12 months, your budget just changed. The tariff is a consumption tax on you, the buyer, not on the foreign manufacturer. If you have a 401k, and roughly 60% of American workers do, the S&P 500 decline we described matters to you directly. A 1.8% single-day drop is not catastrophic on its own. But when it is part of a pattern, when defense stocks fall, when financial sector stocks fall, when the dollar index weakens against the Canadian dollar, the euro, and the yen simultaneously, what you are watching is a slow repricing of American risk. Your retirement account is not immune to that repricing. It is directly exposed to it. The gold price matters to your savings because it is an inflation signal as well as a fear signal. When gold is at $5,594 an ounce, the people managing the world's largest pension funds and sovereign wealth funds are buying insurance against dollar instability. If they are right, the purchasing power of your dollar-denominated savings declines. That is not abstract. That is the cost of eggs, the cost of rent, the cost of everything denominated in dollars. And then there is the Five Eyes fracture. This is the one that is hardest to put a price on, but it may be the most consequential. The GCHQ, British Intelligence, MI6, the Australian Signals Directorate, the Communications Security Establishment of Canada. These are not redundant systems. They are interlocking pieces of a single network. When one piece pulls back, the others compensate, but the whole system becomes less effective. Former intelligence officials have said publicly that no single country, including the United States, has the capacity to replace what the Five Eyes network provides collectively. When you fracture that network over trade leverage, you are trading long-term security infrastructure for short-term economic posturing. and history is not kind to that trade. Here is where we land. In Tuscaloosa, Alabama, there is a 4,000-acre site that once housed an American manufacturing complex. It is abandoned now. In Windsor, Ontario, there are cranes. There is concrete being poured. There are engineers from 3 continents reviewing blueprints for a facility that will produce what the Alabama site no longer does. That is not metaphor. That is the physical reality of what happens when policy pushes capital away. In a warehouse in Montreal, bottles of sourpuss, a Phillips distilling product, are being labeled under Canadian operation. The recipe has not changed. The product has not changed. The country of manufacture has. And in Innisfail, Alberta, the CarbonCapture Inc. project that was supposed to be an American clean tech achievement, an American export of innovation to the world, is now a Canadian achievement. The patents are the same. The engineers are the same. The country is different. Mark Carney, when asked about this moment in a recent interview, quoted the Czech playwright and statesman Václav Havel. He said, and I quote, "We are taking the sign out of the window." Havel used that phrase to describe the moment when people stop performing compliance and start living in truth. Carney used it to describe Canada's moment of economic reorientation. He is saying, clearly and on the record, that Canada is no longer performing a kind of commercial deference it no longer feels. It is making different choices, and the capital flows confirm it. Trump started this fire. He lit it with tariffs, with the 51st state rhetoric, with the demands for capitulation. But here is the thing about economic fires. Every effort to escalate, every new demand, every additional tariff, it is not a bucket of water. Every bucket of water is gasoline. The more aggressive the pressure, the more rational it becomes for capital to leave. The more rational it becomes for allies to make alternative arrangements. The more obvious it becomes to the world that the most stable long-term bet is not the country with the most weapons, but the country with the most predictable rules. 5 companies have already voted. $70 billion have already moved. 40,000 hours of video footage. Wait, wrong story. 10,000 hours of video, billions of dollars, and 5 corporate relocations are on the record. The question is not whether the exodus is real. The question is whether you are watching it closely enough to protect yourself. So here is what I want you to do right now. Drop a comment below. Tell me which part of this story hit you hardest. Was it the companies leaving, the UAE money, the Five Eyes fracture? Your answer shapes what we cover next. If you are not subscribed, hit that button right now, because the Trump response to all of this is coming. And when it does, we are going to break it down the same way we just broke this down. No spin, no shouting, just facts, sources, and what it means for your life. Share this video with one person who needs to understand what is actually happening to the American economy right now. We will see you in the next one.